"Then it is settled," said the Count, "and I give you my solemn assurance that I only waited an opportunity like the present to realize plans that I have long meditated." Franz did not doubt that these plans were the same concerning which the Count had dropped a few words in the grotto of Monte Cristo. And while the Count was speaking, the young man watched him closely, hoping to read something of his purpose in his face. But his countenance was inscrutable, especially when, as in the present case, it was veiled in a sphinx-like smile. "But tell me now, Count," exclaimed Albert, delighted at the idea of having to chaperone so distinguished a person as Monte Cristo. "Tell me truly whether you are in earnest, or if this project of visiting Paris is merely one of the chimerical and uncertain air castles of which we make so many in the course of our lives, but which, like a house built on the sand, is liable to be blown over by the first puff of wind." "I pledge you my honor," replied the Count, "that I mean to do as I have said. Both inclination and positive necessity compel me to visit Paris." "When do you propose going thither? Have you made up your mind when you shall be there yourself?" "Certainly I have. In a fortnight or 3 weeks' time. That is to say, as fast as I can get there." "Nay," said the Count, "I will give you 3 months ere I join you. You see, I make an ample allowance for all delays and difficulties." "And in 3 months' time," said Albert, "you will be at my house." "Shall we make a positive appointment for a particular day and hour?" inquired the Count. "Only let me warn you that I am proverbial for my punctilious exactitude in keeping my engagements." Okay, it seems like Franz doesn't have the information, but he knows, he's on to Dante, that whatever he's setting up with Albert here is part of his larger plan that he only heard speak of very briefly when he was with Sinbad the Sailor dropping hashish. Franz seems to be getting on to Dante's longer game. And I think we can take the description here, even though we've kind of broadened it to be a little bit more than just Franz's perspective, I think the description can still place us in his mindset with this line here as Franz is discerning Dante as he's making this promise to Albert. Says, "The young man watched him closely, hoping to read something of his purpose in his face, but his countenance was inscrutable, especially when, as in the present case, it was veiled with a sphinx-like smile." That's a complete observation from and rooted in Franz's experience. Sphinx-like smile. I mean, Albert isn't thinking that. Albert is aloof, oblivious to these things, delighted at the idea of having to chaperone so distinguished a person, as the text says today, showing the divergence of, not even divergence, just the different paths that Franz and Albert are in the world, but with Dante specifically. Albert seems a little bit more susceptible to the razzle-dazzle. And this also feels like a bit of foreshadowing, though to what extent and end I don't know, obviously, but that last line of Dante's, "Let me warn you that I am proverbial for my punctilious exactitude in keeping my engagements." I am not confident I said punctilious correctly, but that's what I went with. To me, as a writer, I would think, oh, that's setting up some sort of scenario for Dante to arrive when Albert least expects it, because he doesn't actually think Dante will follow through on his plans, or that he'll be a little bit more lenient with his day and time, meaning that Dante, should he go to Paris, should that be where the story goes, is going to arrive when Albert might not be there, perhaps. And then what does that scenario entail? Who knows? Okay, what's that? Oh, yeah, thanks for reminding me that it's the pink Post-it note that I need to read from here. Yes, okay, so I got the pink Post-it note in the biography of Dumas. Right, this is about Dumas, particularly in his early life, working with the stage, his working habits. And I feel like I've alluded to this before, but I'm just going to get more specific with it now. This is talking about the, not trouble necessarily, but the unique living arrangement he had with a woman of the time. And I will preface it by a quote that apparently Dumas favored at this time in explaining his relationship with this woman, which is an aphorism of Alphonse Karr, saying that after a certain length of time, when a couple share a room, they cease being lover and mistress and become just male and female. And that is to justify the arrangement they had, which was that Dumas' working habits were incredibly hard to accommodate for, because he was often up with the sun. He was writing for about 3 or 4 hours before having breakfast with her. He would follow that up with a bit of snipe shooting and then settle down to work again in the late morning, only to take about an hour's break to have dinner and go swimming. And I think in this case, dinner is referring to lunch, where back in the day it was breakfast, dinner, supper, not breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Because it goes on to say that after the evening meal, he and Belle, that's the name of the woman, would go for a little romantic stroll along the beach. But then by 9 o'clock, he would sit down to write for another 2 or 3 hours before he fell asleep again. That's a lot of writing in one day. I've got about a good 3 hours in me if it's something I'm really passionate about and working on. Otherwise, my brain stops after a while. Granted, I also haven't had the schedule, the luxury of schedule to wake up, write, do something, go back to writing, eat, go for a stroll, come back, write again. I feel like there's always obligations in my day that are preventing me from treating writing like a career. But what do we take from that passage? I think what I took while reading it, and the kind of context that I took forward through the rest of the story, was just his commitment to writing affected his relationships. This wasn't a one-off, but this was just a good illustration of how it could affect things. And you would imagine that after a while, one romantic stroll or one quick swim and sleeping in separate bedrooms with your significant other eventually would lead you to stray from one another. Particularly if you're not approaching that situation with intention and making sure that you and your partner are both accounted for emotionally and physically and all that stuff. He clearly was more interested in writing than in relationships, at least emotional relationships. We all know he loved a good physical relationship. And I will leave it at that for today. Join me here tomorrow as we see if Dante and Albert make a date. They're going to make a date. Put it on the calendar. We'll find out. Join me here tomorrow. Okay, bye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.